we grew a great team there that really built that business, that commercialized that business. You have to have enough security in the practice you built or what you're doing that you could hire really bright people that could move the ball forward.
When you do this over a period of decades, by the end, you got some pretty good stuff. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Pick Now podcast. I am your host, Jeff Munn. As you know, this podcast explores the difficult choices that entrepreneurs have to make without necessarily knowing all the information and even whether it's going to work out. I have this week for our conversation a law firm partner, an entrepreneur, a book author, an influencer in the healthcare space before the term influencer was even a thing. And it's all in one person, Scott Becker. Scott, welcome to the Pick Now podcast.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for having me on. We greatly appreciate the chance to visit with you, visit with your audience. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So one of the things there where I like to start, Scott, and I know you started out as a law firm lawyer. I think you and I went to University of Illinois for undergrad at roughly the same time, if I remember right. But, I started with a traditional career, then went off to other things. You started as a law firm partner and then kind of did this entrepreneurial thing almost on the side as like a adjunct. Like, where did that impulse, do you think, come from?
Sure. So I would say there's different pieces of that. Yes. So I ended up doing two principal things in my career. Partnered a large law firm, McGuireWoods, great law firm. And then side by side with that, and there's a connection, started a media company that ended up turning into a significant media company in healthcare called Becker's Healthcare. So there's sort of two different pieces of this. The first piece is, in the world that I grew up in, we're expected to be, a doctor, lawyer, an accountant, one of those three. And I ended up being an accountant and lawyer. And the concept was that you were going to be a lawyer, but you were going to be more than a lawyer. You weren't just going to be a lawyer. You're going to be a lawyer and an investor, or a lawyer and in business, and so forth. And that was sort of the community, the mantra, the thinking. And so a lot of lawyers from a generation ago in the community we grew up in ended up investing in real estate and doing other types of things. I wasn't so interested in that. And at some point, and toyed around with it a little bit, and at some point became really serious about becoming a lawyer and being a lawyer. And that was sort of the start of my real career. First Cat Mution, now KMZ, then a firm called Ross & Hardy's, which merged into McGuireWoods. And I've been at McGuireWoods really ever since. And we joined Ross & Hardy's about 1993 or so. Our firm merged into McGuireWoods 10 years later or so. But the concept growing out of my first law firm experience was, if you're going to be in practice as a lawyer, you either had to generate your own clients, be a rainmaker, or you could manage big teams. And there was a third category: you could just be such a great lawyer at one specific thing that was your ticket to having some independence, some ability to control your future, to have some autonomy. I saw my pathway as being a really good lawyer and also building a practice. And so when I was about, this goes back a long time ago now, started to build a practice specifically in the healthcare area. And as I started to build a practice in the healthcare area, I had a partner of mine that had built a great practice in a niche area. He had built a practice in the dialysis and nephrology area, which again, unless you had lived in the area,
that is niche,
that was an area. But he built a really successful practice in that area. So my example was to try and build a practice in the healthcare area. And in starting to do that, I started to try and build a reputation as a healthcare lawyer who sort of knew healthcare law and business, and started to do a very simple newsletter and then put on a very small conference. And so I was doing these completely as what you'd call today thought leadership or influencer, whatever you want to call it, before we knew the term thought leadership or influencer.
Right.
I mean,
and was this
talks about
Scott? Let me stop just for, and I don't want to date you and me too much, but when you started this newsletter, was it a newsletter or was it an email?
No, it was literally a newsletter. It was literally no. You hit it exactly right. It was like 4 or 6 pages in a very short newsletter around a specific niche in healthcare. But to go back. So the goal was to develop sort of what you would call now a thought leadership reputation in healthcare, and to use that as a sort of calling card to build a practice in the healthcare
Right.
legal business as a healthcare lawyer. And that's what I did. And then as I was in this about 8 to 10 years as a newsletter and a conference, those started to take off. Those started to go really well. Like the
Mm-hmm.
newsletter had built a following, and the conference had built a following. And that led me at some point, 5 to 10 years after I'd started it, 5 to 10 years after I was really starting to build a legal practice, to start to really look at, should I try and turn this media effort, which is really a thought leadership effort, into a real business?
Uh-huh.
And at that point, I was 8 to 10 years into that. So this goes back 20, 25 years ago, and started to hire people full time. This was me individually, not the law firm, into the media business
Uh-huh.
to sort of organize conferences, to write stuff, to sell sponsorships, to do all the kinds of things you do in a small media company. And so that was sort of the pathway I took. So when I talk about it in reference or in hindsight, built my legal practice in the 30s, built my law practice, built my law practice in the 30s, built a media company in the 40s, and did both of them with great teams and around sort of business niches, both in
Uh-huh.
healthcare and then niches within healthcare. So it was a great fun. But we've largely maintained both of these careers forever, and have enjoyed it tremendously. I have great partners and colleagues in both businesses,
So
and
when you were
grew.
starting this, who were you employed by? Was it Ross and Hardy's? Was it Catton? Was it
Right. So I
McGuireWoods?
was employed at this point. That's a great question. I was employed by Ross and Hardy's, and this
Uh-huh.
goes back to the, mid early 1990s.
Yeah, I
My
didn't even
first
remember that Ross and Hardy's had merged into McGuireWoods. Like,
McGuireWoods. Yeah. So
yeah.
we ended up merging into McGuireWoods now a long time ago. But yes, I started this at Ross and Hardy's, which was
Uh-huh.
really about 120 lawyers in back in the day. Really, really nice place to work. Very
Yeah.
entrepreneurial place. I was a young lawyer. I wasn't a partner yet, and so the firm wouldn't really was back and forth on really the assets and the resources towards business marketing didn't go to associates. They went to partners, they went to senior
Yeah.
partners, and so forth. And so I ended up having to sort of at some point fund it myself, do it myself. And so thus we ended up, then it started to grow in a significant way once I really got after it. But
Uh-huh.
it was a real key to me building a legal practice and building a reputation as somebody in healthcare who sort of knew healthcare law and knew healthcare business. Now, if you fast forward 30, 40 years, 30 years now, there's a huge percentage of people in healthcare that would have no idea that I was a lawyer by background. They just don't connect the
Right.
dots. They're two
Right.
different things entirely, and they're run as two different things. We've got a great CEO of Becker's Healthcare that runs that business day to day. She's been with me for 20 plus years there, and it's just magnificent, and have built a great team there.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I was at a law firm in the 90s, and I can't imagine as an associate going and saying, "Hey, I got this great idea that's, yes, it could turn into business and it's going to distract me." And, I mean, I could just imagine the perspective that the law firm partners would bring to this, young upstart associate thinking he's going to do things a little differently. And you pulled it
And
off.
yeah, I mean, the positive is I had a department chair who was sort of my mentor, great lawyer, and had built a great practice. And he was quite supportive.
Uh-huh.
When we couldn't get support from the firm to do it, he didn't say to me, "Stop doing it." He said, "You know what? Do it yourself," as sort of both really more of a, because it helped me build a great practice, helped me build a
Right.
great legal practice. That he was very, very supportive. And he wasn't, he just said, "You got to own it yourself and do it yourself, but you can do it. But
Uh-huh.
you got to continue to make sure you're doing everything you got to do at the law firm, do your hours, do your business development, do everything you're doing." And so you had to be, I mean, for a period of time as a lawyer, almost no matter what as a lawyer, you have at some period of your career almost two full-time jobs if you're going to build a practice, which is
Right.
to both bill hours and build a practice. And this was the part of me that was really building a practice. And side by side, at some point, I started hiring people, and that turned into a real company. So you end up in the situation, no matter what you do as a law firm partner, in some ways, as you're growing and developing, you almost have two full-time jobs. That's sort of how I felt for a period of time.
Yeah, what kind of hours were you putting in during that time? Because I'm assuming you're probably billing 2,000 hours or so, give or take, and then
Yeah,
doing
I
all
mean,
this other stuff.
Yeah, no, we were billing. I would say I was never a biller of billing. Like I was never a person billing 2,200 hours, 24 hours. I was never that person, but I
Uh-huh.
always was billing 1,800 hours, and I was
Yeah.
building a practice and growing a practice.
Uh-huh.
And we were at a firm that was there were two parts of it. The firm was very, very supportive of it. They just wouldn't fund it. So they were
Mm.
very supportive. Like when I talked to the marketing people, they would say, "Well, we'll support it when you're a partner. We'll support it when you're an equity partner. We'll support it when you're
Yeah.
And it would just you couldn't get help on it. But
Yeah.
they were very supportive in not stopping me from doing it. And of course,
Uh-huh.
it's a very different environment today. That was a 120 person law firm. When we merged into the firm McGuireWoods, it was 10 years later or so,
Yeah.
and I both the firm McGuireWoods has been incredibly gracious in allowing me to largely do what I do,
Uh-huh.
but I've maintained great relationships with important clients of the firm and great colleagues at the firm, and the firm has been just incredibly gracious about the whole thing. And at some point Becker's Healthcare has had for 20 plus 25 years or so completely separate offices. I never go to that other office. Other people run the business day to day. I'm involved as chief content officer. I'm involved in a lot of pieces of it. But really, we grew a great team there that
Uh-huh.
really, and a very focused team that really built that business, that commercialized that business, where I was somewhat of a thought leader, content person, and they really built the business.
So tell me about well, so first of all, I'm going to assume, and I don't know if I'm right on this, that at the time you kind of merged into this bigger law firm, McGuire Woods, you were a partner. Were you a partner
Yes,
at that
yes,
point?
yes, yes, yes.
Which probably
I was
made
already
that
at
part
that point
easier.
yes, I was already at that point a very successful partner at the firm
Yeah.
at Ross and Hardy's, and the new firm had to look at what we were doing, understand what I was doing, and get comfortable with it. But 100%.
Yeah, yeah. And so tell us about the growth and development of Becker's Healthcare. You said it starts out with a newsletter and a conference, and obviously you know
Sure.
it's got tentacles
Right.
all
So
over the place, multiple podcasts, the whole thing.
so we started with a very small newsletter around a specific niche. This was around ambulatory surgery centers. Now we have 5 to 6 main conferences and 10 or so co-located in larger conferences.
Wow.
So the conferences each year, the biggest conference is about 4,000 plus attendees a year. That's in April. That's what we call our annual meeting. We have a meeting around health IT and revenue cycle management and digital health. We have a large meeting in the fall that's called our CEO and CFO roundtable. When we started this, it was a panoply of speakers of different people speaking. About 15, 20 years ago, we started to bring in keynote speakers. So we've had
Hmm.
over the years, and we've got this, for example, in April, we'll have Troy Aikman and President George Bush speaking.
Wow.
We just had a conference where Wayne Gretzky spoke, and I think we had Patrick Ewing, and we also had Caitlin Clark and Jack Nicklaus, the famous golfer. So we've tried to make it sort of teach and entertain.
Hmm.
A ton of specific healthcare sessions, then a ton of entertainment sessions, but it's grown into a spot where it's one of the best known healthcare business media companies. It's the team has done a great job of growing it out. Great leadership, Jessica Cole, my CEO, or our CEO, and just we've had great in the newsletters. We've got probably 15, 17 newsletters that go out a day that are electric newsletters, and then we've got webinars and white papers and all kinds of things that go with a media company today. And it's we've built a great team, and we try and make sure that we try and say a magnet for listeners, for readers, and attendees. So we need people that want to come to the conferences, that want to read the newsletters, that want to listen to the podcast, that want to stay up to date on what the core issues are in healthcare and healthcare business.
So as an entrepreneur, I look at you and I think, oh my gosh, that is so much. How can you possibly do all of it? And I know that you're not doing all of it. And I think about some of my clients who, I've worked with them at the stage of like, I need to do it all to I need to grow a good team and delegate it to them. Like, can you walk us through how you did that? Because you're basically holding down two full-time jobs. You're running a large company. You're a prominent law firm, and throw in, and you're an author too. Like, how do you
Yeah,
allocate your time, and how do you think about how to allocate your time?
sure. So we think about we always talk about the founder's evolution in sort of three stages. And Jeff, this will resonate with you because you work with lots of founders and lots of entrepreneurs. The first stage of being a founder is essentially you're sort of the chief cook, bottle washer. You sort of do
Yeah.
everything. And all of us, it's an old adage, but there's a lot of truth to it. Then when you're early on, you're doing a lot of stuff. So you're selling, you're writing, you're practicing law, you're billing hours, and you're bringing in business. In the media business, you're selling to customers, and you're putting the agendas together, and all those kinds of things. The second phase of an entrepreneur, the second evolution I like to say is you start to hire people that leverage you and fill in a lot of those spots. So you're still maybe one of the most talented people in the company, but you're starting to hire people in the law firm. You're starting to hire people that start to manage and work with you on some of your clients, and that gives you room to do more growing of the business, to be both counseling and guiding and growing and bringing in more people. And the same thing in the media business. You start to bring in more people, and they're not necessarily yet better than you, but this is the second stage of being a founder or evolving, but they're helpful, and you start to leverage yourself, and that gives you what we think of as like, we think of things often in, are they 2x growth multipliers? Are they 10x growth multipliers? So the first stage is you're out of doing everything yourself, but you haven't quite yet got the concept that you've got to build the best and the most talented teams, but you know you need help. And so you've got that's the next stage where you've got people working with you. They fill a lot of roles, but it's that third stage of an entrepreneur where things can go 10x. And 10x spot is where you hire people in the law firm, and some of those people can handle clients better than you could handle them. They're just good at what they do. And you get to a certain point in the practice of law where there's a certain sort of prime for most people in whatever kind of deal work they're doing. And a lot of those people are really, really good at it. So you have much more flexibility to be out doing things like generating business and growing the firm and networking and trying to bring in clients. And it's very similar in the media business. You get to a spot where the CEO is with me today. I could never do the job that she does. It's just that's not false humility. That's reality. There's an editor in chief, and there's actually a couple leaders of the editorial team. Back in the day, I did a lot of writing. I could never run an editorial team which has 30, 35 full-time writers like they do it. I just couldn't do it. Not false humility. You couldn't do it. Same with the sales team. The sales team is run by a woman who's fantastic. She's been with us for 10, 15 years, is a magnificent leader. Sort of the third stage of an entrepreneur is you are surrounded by people that do their jobs better than you could do them. And that's just reality. And then the ability, then there's an ability for an organization to grow because it's not reliant on your energy, your drive. Now you've got lots of different people growing and thriving, and that's where you want to be. It's the same thing in the law firm. One of the former colleagues that used to work with me, now she helps to run the law firm. She's on the firm's executive committee. Another one runs the healthcare department. A couple other have very prominent roles in the firm. One ran the private equity department for years. And they ended up doing those jobs better than I could ever do them. And that's where you want to be as a founder. When you get to the spot, the first stage is you're doing everything yourself. Second stage, you've leveraged yourself.
Right. But
the third stage is you've really got people that are better than you at what they do. And it doesn't mean that you don't have some special skill or some talent. You do, you have something, but you really realize, like there was years ago where somebody said, well, do you want to come back and run this? I'm like, well, I couldn't do that. That's just not false humility. That's the reality of it when you get to a different size organization or a different sort of sophistication of an organization. So that's sort of the evolution of organizations. And then you sort of have this constant challenge of, as you step out of roles, and you and I have talked about this before, there is some, as you step out of leadership of whether it's the practice or step out of complete leadership of the media company, there's always sort of this, there's a both sides of that. There's some great freedom in being able to step out. And there's obviously some impact on your own ego in stepping out when you sort of move away from being like, you're the person and then you're not the person. And those are interesting pieces of life and evolutions as a founder.
How have you navigated that? Because that's one that I hear over and over again, whether it's the person who's really trying to learn how to delegate and hire those people that are smarter than he is or she is, or even the person on the other side of an exit thinking like, who am I now? Right? Like that's a huge navigation for people. What's that been like for you?
Well, I think there's two different distinct stages you just talked about.
Yeah.
The first is the delegation stage, and we've seen partners do this in all different kinds of ways, and business people do this in all kinds of ways. The partner that was my mentor was very big on hiring bright people and giving them lots of freedom. But then he would have a relatively not short fuse, but he didn't tolerate people that weren't really, really smart or really good at what they did.
Yeah.
And that was sort of my concept in building a team. Was I was not a micromanager. I wanted to work with really bright people. And there were evolutions in that, because when we go through stages 1, 2, and 3, stage 2, you still might be working with some people that aren't as talented as you'd like them to be, because you haven't really fully built out the team and the quality that you want to have. There's a certain point in time where that becomes easy because you've got really bright people, and there's all these concepts. You've seen this written about a million times in different places. You can hire great people and manage them lightly.
Yeah.
Or you hire okay people and manage them very tightly or very closely. And for me, we've had partners at the firm that work with either model. We've had great partners that have built great practices, and they manage very closely, and they do a great job of it. We've had others where we manage, like my method of managing was, we would check in several times a day. We'd have status meetings all the time, but I wasn't micromanaging. I had really bright people doing stuff and leading teams of core clients.
Yeah.
And the same thing in the media business was hiring really bright people and giving them lots of flexibility to run things. And that was the method of the first issue, of the delegating issue. That was this evolution of hiring better and better people and brighter people, where it was easy to delegate and didn't have to micromanage. And I had a great model in that, in the senior partner that I used to work for. The second part of this, which is the exit concept. When you first exit, I served as chairman of our healthcare department at McGuireWoods, between McGuireWoods and Ross and Hardy's, for 14 years. That's a very long time to serve as a chair of a department. And so by the time I stepped down from it, I was very much ready to step down from it. But you end up being the center of a huge part of the firm. You end up being involved in all the firm, everything, and you feel very central to the firm. And when you step down from that, you feel quite sort of, you're relieved to step down, but you feel very empty in a way, because this is what was your part of what you were doing for a long time.
Right.
And those are very hard evolutions. And in my experience, they take a couple years to sort of work through and get to the other spot where you're disconnected enough from that role you had and that leadership that you had, that you no longer, pine for, oh my God, I still want to be the person. I still want to be the guy. But it takes a couple years to get there. And I think it's underrated how challenging that is for so many people that are leaders, entrepreneurs, others, to step out of that situation. And the same thing in the media company. Years ago, when I really turned over leadership to our CEO, it was there were periods of time where that was challenging for me, ego-wise, where you're sort of like, you're the person, and she's done an incredible job of building a team and managing a team in a way that I could never do it. And so you have to be so thankful. And there's still those moments, not anymore, but you go through a period of time where you get used to the fact that you're no longer that person. And so then you have a choice as you get into next stages. Do you sort of roll away and go off to pasture and go golf and play tennis and those kinds of things? Or do you try and keep yourself totally engaged, but in ways that are supportive and don't interfere with the leadership that's at those places today? And so I've obviously chosen the latter, to stay heavily involved in the world versus stepping away. But it's constantly finding that right spot and being very supportive of your colleagues, without, like Bob Iger's the sort of opposite of this. He sat on the board of his company, and Bob Iger's obviously a much bigger, by a billion times bigger than I am. But he stayed on the board of his company, and he might have stayed as chairman for a while, but then, he had his successor take over Disney, and then Bob Iger, was constantly belittling his successor and to step back into the role.
And then reinserting himself. Yeah.
And then reinsert himself again. And you want to very much be not that leader, and give your successors room to grow and develop. And there's obviously there's always some ego and some tensions and evolution in that. But you work through those things and try and it takes a little bit.
Yeah. So let's take the department chair transition. So you're leaving from this kind of central role in the firm and not being involved in the same level of discussions. Did you have, because you had Becker's Healthcare, did you have another place to like devote your attentions to? And what did leaving the department chair role open up for you in terms of other possibilities that you couldn't do before when you had those responsibilities?
Yeah, I don't know if that's yeah, that's a great question. I remember being ready to be done being department chair. I was,
Yeah.
it just got to be exhausting, but it was also very exhilarating, and you're very
Uh-huh.
tuned into everything in the firm. You're meeting with
Yeah.
all the other department chairs, you're going to headquarters, you're really running the group, and it was a great role, and I loved it. And I just had got to the point where I was no longer serving me or the firm to do it, because the
Hmm.
energy it took for what had to be done was
Hmm.
energy I no longer had for it after doing it for 14 years. It just wasn't
Right.
there.
Sure.
And my successor was ready to do it. Now she's on the executive committee of the firm and ended up being just doing a fantastic job, just did a great job. Um, so that was challenging. Did it free me for other things? I don't know if it ended up freeing more mind space to focus more on the building of the media business or not. I had
Hmm.
already by that point had a CEO in the media business who's with me still, Jessica Cole, who's fantastic, my
Hmm.
partner in there. So I would it was probably more. It's so interesting you asked that question. I remember it being stepping down for department chair, both relieved, but it being deflating because it was a
Yeah.
big part of what I was doing. And I don't remember filling the vacuum so much with Becker's Healthcare. I do remember, I was always involved in a handful of things like the Becker's Healthcare and McGuireWoods and some charitable efforts and so forth. So I never felt like I was bored, but I certainly felt deflated for a period of time as I stepped out of that role, still very involved in managing and dealing with clients and
Yeah.
developing clients. But yeah, it was deflating. I don't remember it being like. I think there's a different piece of your question that I think is so right on and so important. I'm a huge believer, if you have great people on your team and you leave them on the bench without a real leadership role of some sort, that
Uh-huh.
they become disengaged and they find their energies elsewhere. They end up
Yeah.
devoting their energies elsewhere. So
Yeah.
I'm a huge believer in that. In anything I've ever been running or involved in running, whether it's the companies or being on boards, I'm a big believer. If you have very talented, motivated people and you leave them out in the cold for too long without a role,
Hmm.
they find
Hmm.
something else to do. They
Yeah.
find another place to engage and their energies to go to, or they end up depressed and negative. But mostly they find something else to do. So one of my colleagues years ago had become a little disengaged. And at some point, I had to tell the colleague, as long as you're going to be here for the next 10 years, 20 years, or for a long time,
Yeah.
you better figure out a way to re-engage and to love this. And that person is one of my favorite partners and lawyers of all time. And he was able to make that course correction very clearly and understood what we were talking about. But
Hmm.
it's a challenging thing. I think no, I don't know that I was already sort of like had handed over leadership of Becker's Healthcare to Jessica. And
Yeah.
it happens once you hand over leadership, you can co-lead, you could vice lead, but you can't lead
Yeah.
without, you have to be very, very careful about leading because, each of the leaders that took my places end up developing great teams, great relationships. I mean, Amber Walsh in the law firm, then Holly Buckley and Jessica Cole at the media company, but they built great teams, and those teams are really their teams. They may work for the company, but those people really relate to them. I mean,
Right.
because they've known them for a long time, they've worked really closely with them for a long time. It's like in any of these businesses, I mean, I'll, if you're 50 and your team's being managed by a 40-year-old or 35-year-old, at some point, that whole group
Hmm.
of colleagues is more closely connected to that person. It's not necessarily an age thing, but those are the people that they're really working with day to day,
Right.
that they trust, that they know, that have their
Right.
back, that are supporting them. And so your job is to be supportive, but never to try and interfere with what they're trying to do.
So how do you do that, Scott? Because you were talking earlier about how when you're giving up, particular areas of expertise and you're hiring someone who's smarter than you at that or better than you at that, that you still have your area of expertise or contribution, whatever you want to say. Like, what is yours?
Yeah, no, I think some of my partners would ask that question and say, "What is this exactly?" No, I mean, you end up like it depends which business you're in. You
Uh-huh.
end up in the media business. We end up staying really closely connected to top leaders, to top people, hyper
Hmm.
supportive of the people at the company that are doing the job, hyper supportive of the people that are leading the groups at the company, and staying connected to the network, and being literally crazily supportive of Jessica and all the people that work with Jessica and the people at Becker's Healthcare. And similarly in the law firm, you end up staying very, very closely connected to the, you know, to the important clients that you evolved with at the firm, and very, very close with the colleagues that are growing the firm and taking care of the firm. And you try and
Hmm.
stay very, very, very closely connected. In the law firm, I was smart enough to, I was leader in the firm, on the board of the firm. I was smart enough to step down as an equity partner a couple years before anybody asked me to do so, and and
Uh-huh.
and, and that gave me, and I turned over in law firms. People count all kinds of things and stuff like that, but I was smart enough and understood it well enough to turn over client responsibility, client credits, and all the business that I developed over the years before anybody wanted me to or asked me to do so.
Hmm.
It was the opposite of some of the people that I had worked for, and so that
But just kind of hang
helped.
on as long as they can. Yeah.
Yeah, and that left me in good stead. I mean, to go back to one of your other questions, the fact that I developed a separate business and was doing well economically in the other business, it gave me lots of freedom and flexibility to treat people how I want to treat them, to
Hmm.
not feel like I had to hold on and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
that was viewed very positively by the firm, and they've been very gracious to me in kind. And so that worked out really, really well. In the media company, similar types of things. I mean, there's a lot of people at the media company that make a lot more money in compensation than I do. I get paid as a board member and some other things, but not like I don't get compensated highly. But that works well because I still have
Uh-huh.
ownership. It's gone great. It's gone
Uh-huh.
fantastic and all those kinds of things. But like there's a concept we use in business, which is the opposite of sort of employer employee. We view it as everything has to be thrive thrive. So I,
Hmm.
I need my colleagues next to me thriving, me thriving, the organization thriving, but it's not me thriving, them here.
Hmm.
And all of us have had bosses. We had a boss at one time or a partner one time. We used to joke that a penny for him was more important than a dollar for any of us.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And our concept was not that concept. Our concept was to be in a spot where I want my colleagues to be superstars in their own right, to completely thrive in their own right, to have big names, big brands in what they do in their own right, and make sure it works within the firm umbrella, make sure it's
Hmm.
side by side and so forth.
Hmm.
But it was not as though I have a big name and you don't. It was I want you thriving. So all of my colleagues in the law firm, they have thrived really well. They've all done great. They all not that the economics are important, but they all make a great deal more money than I do today, and that's how it's
Uh-huh.
supposed to be. That's
Uh-huh.
good. That's how we
Uh-huh.
want it. And similarly in the media company, our top people do really, really well. Our whole firm does very, very well. The whole company does very, very well. And there's been a lot of people thriving, and that's the goal, that they thrive. They thrive side by side with you. They don't thrive subordinate to you. And I
Yeah.
think that's a concept that bleeds through really everything that we try and do, that you've got thrive cultures.
Yeah, I love that thrive. I mean, another way that I hear people talk about it is the notion of like servant leadership, and you're kind of bringing this organization along that is, much bigger than you, and is, you're kind of subservient to it, not the other way around. But
Yeah,
I've
and I
never
never
heard it
really,
talked
I
about
never,
as thrive
I never
thrive.
really viewed it as the servant leadership thing.
Yeah,
And I hear it all the time. And
yeah,
sometimes when I hear big ego leaders talk about being servant leaders, it either comes across authentic or not authentic.
right.
And so I always like the concept of thrive. I mean, Holly and Amber, David, Jeff, Bart are five of my closest partners in the law firm.
Uh-huh.
I never view it as I'm their servant or they're my servant. I just
Right.
don't I just don't like it. I don't like
Yeah,
the
you're
concept. I don't like the
partners.
talk. I hear it.
Yeah.
I like there's a concept that Jim Collins used to have of a level 5 leader who could not have his who the level 4 leader might add somebody that had his ego involved in everything, and the level
Yeah.
5 leader was one step up, was able to take their ego away a little bit.
Right. There was that notion of humility, right? I think that was the word that he used.
Yes, and I like that a great deal. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're a leader and you build anything serious, you have to have a real recognition at some point that this person does certain things better than you do. It's just no way around it. You can't build a great organization and if you be the best at everything that anybody does. It's just that this doesn't really work, and it's suffocating for others anyways.
Right.
So I never really liked the term, but every time I hear somebody say they're a servant leader, I just had somebody say it to me at one of our most recent meetings, and it came across so artificial to me and so and authentic to me that I really like the concept of thrive.
I love the words, and I think the distinction that you make is a really valuable one, because it's like I've had that same reaction when I hear someone describe themselves as a servant leader, and it's just like, oh, really? Really? Is that real?
And we see great leaders that are really good at keeping their ego in check. And I think that's what people sort of mean when it's meant well. And I see a lot of that. And it's not easy for a lot of us. I mean, it's not easy. A lot of us have egos. We try and keep them like, we try not to have them be Bob Iger size, but we try and, and again, not to take a shot at Bob Iger, but it was crazy what happened with the board coup and everything else.
Yeah.
But it's, everybody tries to keep most of us try and keep our egos under control, but all of us have egos of some sort.
Yeah, it's almost, to me, as I think about it, it's like you have to have a certain amount of security in yourself. First of all, to be confident enough to lead an organization. And second of all, and maybe even more importantly, to be able to hire people smarter than you. That takes a lot of security and a lot of kind of like, I'm comfortable with myself, including my flaws.
100%. There's a great author that used to write business books. I think he was a consultant and author. This guy, Jeff Fox, used to write business books. And he used to say about hiring that if you're not careful, 7s hire 5s because 7s are concerned that somebody will outshine them. And what you really want to be is a 7 or 8 and hiring 8, 9s, 10s. And it takes enough confidence that you are secure in yourself. I've got this book of business. I'm going to be okay. Now I need the brightest people ever working with me. And, and what happens in all these things is you have people, if you run organizations in the law firm, periodically you'd have great partners that worked under your accounts or worked with your clients that leave the firm. But you have to build a deep enough team and have your ego in check that when that person leaves, they're not dead to you. You don't hate them. You're just like, it is what it is. This is part of the practice. I don't like it. I don't have to like it, but it happens periodically, and you have to have enough security in the practice you've built or what you're doing that you could hire really bright people that could move the ball forward.
So you've stepped away from the department chair, you've stepped away from the CEO of the company. Like, how are you spending your time now? And is it like particular passion projects? I know you have a book that's coming out. I just pre-ordered it. So this is a great opportunity to tell us about that. Like, how are you spending your time, Scott?
No, thank you so much. So I'm still very, very involved with colleagues at the law firm and clients at the law firm. I'm still very involved with Becker's Healthcare. I still do podcasts every single day for Becker's Healthcare. I still moderate at our conferences a ton of sessions. I just got a chance to moderate in addition to, we just had one of our conferences. I think I moderated 11 or 12 sessions over 3 days, plus had a chance to interview Wayne Gretzky. So we stay very involved in both. But they don't take up the time they did when I was building a practice or building the media company.
Right.
So years ago, I'll go to the book in 1 second. Years ago, when I thought at one point that I would be out of Becker's Healthcare by this point, and that's never been the case. I thought, and at some point it will be, but it's not the case. And similarly with the law firm. So years ago, I started a business newsletter that comes out a couple days a week that we enjoy doing a great deal. I do a business podcast, which is really part of if I was originally built a reputation as a thought leader in healthcare over the last 5 to 10 years, I tried to broaden that as to be a thought leader in business that sort of bridges business and healthcare and other things. So I write a newsletter. We do podcast around business. And then, yes, we've written back in the day, we wrote 3 or 4 healthcare books. In the last several years, we've authored a couple business books. And they've been each iterations of each other. So the latest one that is being distributed by Simon & Schuster, published by Forefront Books, comes out in June. It's available for pre-order on Amazon. It's called Building Great Businesses. Goodness, create create momentum, overcome setbacks, and scale with confidence is the title. And the subtitle I can never quite get right. I keep on saying it and keep on hitting it wrong. But the book is Building Great Businesses.
As you do more podcasts, you'll get better at it, Scott. You got a little time before the book comes out. So
oh my God, we're working at it. We're working at it, Jeff. We're totally working at it. But so the book sort of is a iteration of an earlier book I'd written around sort of building businesses called The Entrepreneur's Edge. And what happened is after I wrote The Entrepreneur's Edge, first I wrote a book called Blocking and Tackling about building business. Mm-hmm. And I would say that book, I'm very much an incremental person. I'm a constant sort of, I do something and improve it. It's almost the concept of minimum viable product. So we did an original book called Blocking and Tackling a few years ago around business. And when the book came out, I didn't like the feel, the look. I didn't like anything about it. And so then
wow.
we, for all practical purposes, pulled that book, went back and did a different version, an updated version called The Entrepreneur's Edge, which I liked, which was a solid book, not great. None of these are going to be Pulitzer Prize winning books, but that book at least was like when people like somebody wrote me yesterday, hey, I read your book, The Entrepreneur's Edge. I took a ton of notes on it. I really liked it. Can you come speak at our meeting? And so I was very flattered. It was an email out of nowhere to me, and it was very nice. But the book itself, I would say, it serves a purpose. It's a B plus, C plus, B plus, C, somewhere in there. And it was sort of like what happened is I then went back to the drawing board in this last book called Building Great Businesses, Create Momentum, Overcome Setbacks, and Scale with Confidence. I went back to the drawing there. I got it right, Jeff. Yeah. I went back to the drawing board on this book after I had asked a professional editor for some critique on it. And that professional editor had written me a 5-7 page critique of the book I had done. And in his comments, the guy's name was Stuart Horwitz. And his comments were, I got to him through a different literary somebody, and his comments were right on in where I think I needed to improve that book or redo that book. Then another friend of mine, who was a very, very close friend named Mark Abramson, had said to me, had read the book and said, look, I like it, but you don't do a good enough job of interweaving in stories and how you got there, what you did, and how these worked, and how these concepts work together. Yeah. And so the two comments from my friend who was in business, but by no means a professional reader or writer or anything of that sort, and this professional, author who is a professional author, were very much right on. And that led me to go back to the drawing board and really rewrite the book from scratch using a lot of the concepts we had used. And that's what we did. And so we spent last summer writing the book, literally, wrote it myself, have a co-editor, Scott Becker with Molly Gamble. She did a tremendous job of cleaning it up. And then it went to the publishing firm. And the publishing firm then has a developmental editor that takes it through another run of drafts and improvements. So I would say, again, this is a book that's like a 200-page business book. It's not like a James Collins book. I mean, we actually have an appendix in the book of 15 business books that I just love, that I've really turned to over the years, that were very instructive to me. This is we're proud of this book. It's by no means, it's not going to replace Jim Collins or something like that, or Peter Drucker. It's a solid business book that tells a story of, here's our thoughts on building a business. Here's what works. Here's what doesn't work. At least what has worked and not worked for me. And again, like many entrepreneurs, we've had some really nice successes, some really unsuccesses, or non-successes, and all of us do. And so I've enjoyed writing it a great deal. We're working hard on now distributing it. And it's great fun. I mean, it's an iterative project, because we had written the first one, then a second one, then got some professional outside guidance and wrote the third one. And I feel like it's much better. And I think there's a lot to that. Like, people always talk about this 10,000 hour rule, that you put 10,000 hours in it, something you get better at it. Yeah. And yes, but 10,000 hours, like, I would have never been able to take this next step on this book, 10,000 hours for sure, but the advice of this professional writer and of my friend were real change makers in how we came about this. And that doesn't mean everybody will like the book, but at least for my own grading system, it's better than it was. I mean, it's not gonna be it's not James Clear Atomic Habits, it's not Mel Robbins Let Them, but it's solid. It's a good grade up from the last couple, and it wouldn't have happened without good professional outside advice on it.
Well, first of all, I think you're being too hard on yourself, Scott. But second of all, and I want to applaud you, like so many people, whether they're entrepreneurs or they're authors, they wait until something is perfect to put it out there, and so they never do it. And what I see, whether you're talking about, hey, I'm going to start a newsletter, or I'm going to do this one conference at where was it, the Hilton O'Hare, or
Yes. Yes.
Like, I'm going to start small. I'm going to iterate. It's going to get better. And when you do this over a period of decades, like by the end, you got some pretty good stuff.
Yes.
And it wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been willing to start from a place of like, yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yes, I think there's a lot to be said for that, Jeff, and I love that. I think there's a lot of this start and adjust. But what happens, like people like me who are very wired to get stuff done, you could keep on going down the same path. What I've got better at is I've gotten older. When I was younger, I was very good at building teams and being willing to hire people smarter than myself. That was a real strength, and it was really important to building the law practice and building the media company. It's really, as I've gotten older, I've gotten better at seeking outside advice where I think it could really add value in a way that I think I was too stubborn at some point to do so. And I think I've gotten better at it, and I'm not always great at it, but whether it's what it takes to make a better book, what it takes to be better at this sport, what it takes to be better at podcasting, what it takes to be whatever it is. I've gotten better at seeking advice, and then I have to decide to implement it or not and to execute on it. But it's a constant evolution as a person.
Well, even to go back to the 10,000 hour rule, there's a notion within that 10,000 hour rule that isn't talked about nearly as much, and that's the notion of deliberate practice.
Yes.
And that's and deliberate practice often involves a coach, a teacher, an instructor, someone outside looking in saying, hey, Scott, have you tried it this way? Hey, Scott, what about this? Hey, Scott, what about this? Because that's really the way to ramp up your progress, is to have some kind of objective outside partner helping you out with stuff. And that's exactly what you're doing with the book, which is great.
No, I think that's exactly right. In fact, we did a discussion this today about deliberate practice and the 10,000 hour rule, and I think you've nailed it exactly. If you could do 10,000 hours, if you're not doing it in some deliberate way and thinking and pivoting and growing, it's 10,000 hours you could waste. And
it's the 10,000 hours I spent on my golf game, and I'm no better than
100%. I know that feeling.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm sure the book is full of great stories. If you think about stories in the book that are kind of about entrepreneurial leadership, share a story that comes to mind from the book, a lesson for the viewers of this podcast. What's some advice that you would offer through one of those stories in your book?
Well, if I look at different stories, I've got a few different stories, but one story is when we first started to try and build a business audience or become known in the surgery center business, which is where we started Becker's Healthcare. I couldn't for the life of me get on stages or get in front of people because it was so closely correlated and so closely associated, the Surgery Center Trade Association, with another law firm. And so I think the original name of the company, and I'm not proud of this, was originally something like, F, and the bad word, F, whatever the name of the law firm was. That was the original name of the actual company that we started 30 plus years ago, and I've grown up since then, so I wouldn't do that now. But so there was that. The other thing that we talk about is we talk about everything in business, about building teams, being niche centric, taking care of your customers, and really knowing your business. We talk about those things regularly, and that's not so interesting or so exciting and stuff like that. Other things that were interesting is we talk about this evolution of a company from idea to actual product, to actual revenues, to profits, to scale. We talk a lot about that. We talk about taking in outside funding when you do it, when you don't do it, why you do it, why you shouldn't do it, all kinds of things like that. we talk a lot about teams, we talk a lot about niches, and we talk about just the story of starting to get going and trying to figure it out. And
Right.
there's a constant
Right.
effort to kind of figure it out. I mean,
Yeah.
we loved a lot of it, and we still love a lot of it. Just the whole journey. We love the journey. And I think you talk
Hmm.
about the you know, I'll go back to one other story, which I don't know if it made this book or not. I know it made my last book, but it might be when I was in law school, I had Barack Obama and Eric Posner both in the class that I taught as a third-year law student as a moot court advisor.
Uh-huh.
So legal advisor. I have 12 students. Two of the students are President Obama and Eric Posner.
Uh-huh.
And Eric Posner, you know the name Eric Posner because you're University of Chicago,
Yeah. Yeah. I
right?
know
So
that
you know
name.
Eric
Sure.
Posner. So
Hmm.
you know Richard Posner, Eric Posner's
Yep.
son. And so I have Eric Posner and Barack in my class.
Hmm.
And the two of them are not, there's no false humility here at all. The two of them are eon smarter than me. They're just
Uh-huh.
really smart people. And so they would take the class, we'd be in class, and they would say things like, I think this is what Scott means. This is what Mr. Becker means. This is what he means. And it was like, I felt like I was in like a Saturday Night Live skit from back in the day, and this will date me. Like I was Chris Farley in the skit being like, that's exactly what I meant. And they were, to their credit, Eric and President Obama were both crazily gracious about it. They
Uh-huh.
weren't trying to embarrass me. They're just
Right.
trying to explain it in a way that they just got to.
Uh-huh.
As we talked about earlier, I'm a iterative person.
Uh-huh.
We grow, and we try and figure things out, but
Yeah.
we can't write in the 8th draft in the first draft. Some people
Right.
that you and I know can, I can't.
Yeah.
But they would explain things in a way that the class could understand, that I could understand, and I would have to be like, exactly. I couldn't,
Mhm.
like, I wasn't like, oh no, it was just so clear that these are brighter people than I am. And that made it into at least the last book. It might have made it into this book. It was a fascinating experience. But so many business experiences are so fascinating is how
Yeah.
you get started. Like we hear so much about origin stories. And we talk a lot about origin stories. And you talk
Mhm.
to a lot of founders. And so
Yeah.
it's the same thing with the servant leadership thing. A lot of people are servant leaders. So I don't want to negate that. I don't want to talk negatively about that. But you hear some people talk about origin stories. Like I hear a guy always talk about, I started a healthcare billing company because my third aunt on my sister's side or my mom's side passed away from cancer, and
Uh-huh.
you're just like that just doesn't resonate. That doesn't sound like a true origin story. You know,
Right. Right.
people ask me, how did I get into healthcare? You must love to help people. I'm like, no, of course I didn't get into healthcare. I was trying to help people. I was trying to figure myself out. I was trying to
Uh-huh.
figure out, the business itch to be in and where I
Yeah.
was going to grow a legal practice, where I was going to grow a healthcare media company. It wasn't like there was no origin story
So why
about.
was it healthcare? Was it because one of your mentors was in healthcare,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
what
yeah.
was it?
So what
Yeah.
happens is when I left Canton Mushin, which is a great firm, and at the
Mhm.
time as a young associate, I worked like insanely there and learned a lot, but insanely. I
Yeah.
did it in healthcare because by the time I was done with 3 years at Canton Mushin, I'd done corporate securities there, had no idea what I really wanted to do,
Mhm.
had by chance grown or developed, brought in a couple small healthcare clients, but really by chance, not purposely. And
Yeah.
and at that point, I wanted to join a group. There were a couple groups like this in the city that were more industry verticals than they were just law groups. So like
Uh-huh.
if an industry vertical, like a healthcare group, there was a financial securities practice at a couple firms where
Uh-huh.
you did a mix of corporate, regulatory,
Yeah.
transactional, and some litigation that were still in one group at one point.
Right.
And me, after 3 years of practice, really still had no idea what I wanted to do. I just
Uh-huh.
knew at some point I wanted to build a practice. And so I wanted to be able to explore different areas. I wanted to be in an industry vertical as well. The beauty of an industry vertical, I was never one that wanted to be at a cocktail party and selling legal services to everybody there.
Yeah.
I never wanted to treat everybody like a potential client. I'd rather
Yeah.
know when I'm on for business, know when I'm not on for business. And so to me, being an industry niche where you could learn a lot about an industry, really have some expertise in it, was so much more attractive. It turned out that I interviewed at a couple different groups that were industry niche groups. I
Uh-huh.
ended up joining the one at Ross and Hardy's. The Ross and
Uh-huh.
Hardy's decision was one of the best professional decisions I ever made. It was just, I made it for the right reasons. I joined
Yeah.
there because a few people that I knew really enjoyed practicing there. And as you know, as a young lawyer in your late 20s, not that many places that a lot of people really enjoyed practicing at.
Right.
And I made the decision at that point in my late 20s, if I'm at a place where I'm comfortable, I'll then figure out how to thrive.
Right.
And that ended up being a really, really good decision. And the Canton Mushin decision was a great decision too. It just wasn't like it was based on it was a great firm.
It was
It was
just a
moving in the right
different
direction,
experience. Yeah. Yeah.
but a very different experience. And I was still very young and didn't know, what I was looking for. And I did talk about like, at Cat and Mushin, I did talk about this in the book, and this is not on Catton. This is just the way it was for law firms. If you didn't have your own clients at a law firm and you
Yeah.
were 50,
Yeah.
you saw this. You were just treated with, you had no control over your life.
Right.
We used to joke you were treated like a dog, but you could be 50 and it could be Friday evening and some other partner with a business says, you got to stay here and work all weekend and take care of that. And you had to do it. And you were you're getting paid well for it. I mean, you're getting paid well for it, but you had no control of your life. Yeah. And that was very instructive to me because I very much wanted to be somebody who had control over my life. And so building a practice was when I came back to seriously get after practicing law, I was very intent on building a practice.
Well, I love where, you're basically making these decisions every step of the way. You kept going, you kept asking, what's next? What's next? Got a lot to show for it now. Last question for you before we, bring this conversation to a close, Scott. For the entrepreneur who's more at the beginning part of your journey or of their journey, how do you keep going? And how do you know when to keep going and when to quit and do something else?
Yeah, no, we always say, oh my goodness, you double down, you pivot, or you abandon it. And I think it's they're very, very hard decisions as to when do you double down, when do you pivot, when do you abandon things. But at the end of the day, I see many great entrepreneurs that are very good about. We talk about often commercializing early, meaning you're starting to test market, you're starting to talk to real customers early, and those end up being the ones I think that end up being successful. And at some point, they become uncomfortable because you actually have to sell to customers. You have to actually sell to them early to see if they're willing to buy what you're producing or what you're doing. Yeah. And that's uncomfortable because that's win-loss. That's binary. Are they buying it? Are they not buying it?
Or no, yeah.
Where's it going? And I think those are hard decisions. And I think every business, every entrepreneurial situation is different. There's all this written about burning the boats and going all in. Obviously, I'm not a believer in that. I mean, I'm not a believer in it. It depends what you're doing. But I see all these people that have false bravado saying, well, burn the boats and just do that. Well, I would just do that after you've built enough business that you could support yourself.
Right. Well,
then you can make that decision.
Yeah, Scott, great advice. Looking forward to the book coming out. You want to say the name one last time? We'll give you the practice.
I'm going to try. No, we greatly appreciate it. Anybody pre-ordering the book on Amazon, we would greatly appreciate it. Building great businesses, create momentum, overcome setbacks, scale with confidence, but building great businesses. Scott Becker with Molly Gamble, and Molly's one of our editors-in-chief at Becker's Healthcare, who was very helpful on the book as well. Jeff, what a pleasure to visit with you. Obviously, anybody wants to reach me anytime, LinkedIn or my phone number, text 773-766-5322. Yeah, questions about anything, please reach me.
Awesome. Well, you actually just answered my next question, which was how can people reach out to you? Scott, always a pleasure to connect. Loved having this conversation. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on the Pick Now podcast. We'll call this conversation, we'll bring it to a conclusion, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.